Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We've got holiday season. Well, we're in holiday season. I guess Halloween already counted, but there's going to be a lot of cooking involved in the next couple months. You might need some hot pads, right? So today I thought we need to learn how to make some cute ones that you don't mind having sitting out on the counter because they're gonna be out a lot. You might have some that you've had for a while and they're just getting a little old looking, or maybe there's gunk on them or stains. These are really inexpensive to make and they go a long way. You could even make some of these as like a hostess gift if you're going to stay at someone else's house, or if you're wanting to like go to a dinner party, you could like make a cute one and put something, I don't know, you can get creative. But these are really easy to make. You can be a beginner or more familiar with your sewing machine and still feel really good about these when you're done. I wanted to thank Fiskars and Michaels for helping bring this project to you today. Again, I'm going to be sharing some of the tools that I use all the time and have used for over 10 years. This is one of the versions of the Rotary Cutter that I've always used. These are really great for this type of project because you really want to have something with really clean, straight lines, right angles at your corners. One of the biggest frustrations maybe when you're sewing or starting to sew and you're not quite sure what tools to get to really have a project that is something you can feel proud about. Is maybe like you're using just what you have at home, which might just be a regular pair of scissors, and you're having to like use a piece of paper or something to like trace a right edge or something. I mean, I've been there. Maybe you guys are smarter than me, but what I really like to do is, what I have done is invested in a cutting mat and an acrylic ruler and a rotary cutter. This is going to make all of your cutting so much faster and easier, and you're not gonna have to redo something because you like slightly cut it crooked. These things ensure that you're not wasting any time. And if you're busy, which I know we're not trying to like hustle all the time, we're trying to like be in the moment, but we all have lives that require a lot of us. So this is a tool you need in your tool belt, rotary cutter. Okay, that said, I would like to show you these supplies. I know that we've posted the supplies you'll need for today. I'm gonna set these over here. I've already pre-cut all of my pieces because that is a little harder to do on camera, but you are going to need 2 8x8 pieces of quilting cotton. So this is really thin. Thin is okay. If you have something a little thicker, or if you have some canvas, that's great too. They don't have to be the same color. If you want reversible hot pads, you can do that. But if you are just using up fabric that you have already, you don't want to go buy something new, you don't need very much. One hot pad, you need 2 pieces of 8x8 quilting cotton. You also need 2 pieces of cotton batting. Now this is what you put in between quilts. It's a little bit, it's not really see-through. It's nice and soft and thin. This is low loft and I think it's organic cotton. This is going to help with insulation if you're using hot pads for pulling stuff out of the oven, or just something that's sitting on a wooden table. You don't want to ruin your table. So the batting is important to add some thickness and some protective layers. You need 2 of those. And also you need, it's harder to see this is metallic. I think the brand is Insulbright, but it's an insulated lining and you can hear it's crinkly. This is what you would make like oven mitts out of. It has another layer of protection. The batting goes on each side of the Insulbright, and that helps like wick away any moisture that might be included in what heat is coming out of your pan. So if you cannot get your hands on this insulation lining, or if you're just really not interested in figuring that out, you can use 3 layers of batting. That's going to give you a little bit extra protection, but still be careful. So those are the 3 things. You want all 3 of these pieces, your insulation, your batting, which is cotton, and your quilting cotton, you want all of these to be the same size. So I cut them all out 8 by 8. And then we'll trim them down slightly because we want to make sure our edges are all flush once we've quilted them together. Okay, so the fourth thing that you need is a strip of binding. This is also quilting cotton. You want it to be 2 inches wide. I've tried thinner, and I'll show you what happened in a minute. And you want to have these be like as wide as your yardage if you want. I did 44 inches, so folded my yardage in half and cut 2 inches across. But if you have a certain color or print that you really like, you can splice it together. That's another class. But you can also use scraps if you really want to, but the fastest way to do this is 2 inches by like roughly 44 inches, and you'll have extra left over. Okay, and then on top of those, you're gonna need straight pins, chalk, or I have my Mima's stitch marker. I've tried, like this is for stitching lines before you stitch to make sure they're straight. Quilters use these a lot. I've tried chalk, I've tried the pencils. I've had a lot of frustration over this. This has been my favorite tool so far, and you may or may not have access to one of these, but you can use chalk and a ruler to get the same effect. Okay, so that's where we are going to get started, and I'm going to show you how to put this together. Set aside your binding, and we're going to make a sandwich real quick. These fabrics obviously want to be pre-washed and dried and ironed, because the flatter your fabric, the better everything will lay when you're done. So first, let me switch over to my other camera, and this takes a minute to get up to speed. So I'm going to keep talking to you as the camera warms up. I like to, whenever I get my fabric from the store, I like to just go ahead and bring it home and throw it in the wash and dry right away. That way it's ready for me whenever I'm ready to work on my project. Some people like to iron it before they fold it and put it away. I figure it's going to get wrinkled again, so I just kind of iron it right before I'm about to cut. Okay, so we're going to work on this. It's lagging just a second, so give us, I'm going to say 10 seconds, we'll be ready to go. So first, you're going to put down your 8 by 8 piece of quilting cotton. The second layer is your batting, first piece of batting. If you don't have your Insulated, then you're going to put another piece of batting down. But if you do have Insulated, go ahead and put that on. So then we're going to have another layer of batting. And finally, there we go, the camera has caught up. Finally, the top part of our sandwich. So you've got your first piece of quilting cotton, then your batting, then your insulation, second piece of batting, and finally your second piece of quilting cotton. Now this is pretty thick. It's probably 1/3 of an inch from the surface. This also can be kind of tricky to sew through if you have, if your batting is pretty thick. So I would say go for some very thin batting that's still cotton. And if you're having a hard time getting all of it through your sewing machine, and you really feel like you need to take out one piece of batting or the Insulated, you can do that too. I want to very carefully pin all of these together, making sure I go through all the layers, and I can feel it when I stick my pin down. I can feel it hit the cutting mat, so I know I've gone all the way through. but also double check the other side. You can see where it definitely wants to pucker a little bit. So double check that before you go. And on this one, oops, I didn't get all the way through. So try that one again. You don't want things to be shifting too much as you're going through all 5 layers, because you need to make sure that your lines are lining up for the most part. If there's a section where you catch some of your fabric on the top, but you don't catch it on the bottom, we can trim off a little bit so that it gets all 5 layers included. But for the most part, you want everything to feel flush. Okay, so you've made your sandwich. What's next? So the next section, we want it to end up looking like this. We're going to stitch our lines in one direction. How do we do that so that it looks even? Okay, so you can use your, let me see if I can do this backwards. Use your cutting board, cutting mat, and your ruler. So I'm centering this. This is 8 inches wide, so I'm getting it between the 8 and the 16 on here, which you can't see. And this line right here is my center line. I didn't mark it that way, like the pin marks are not strategic. It's kind of just where they are. Now I'm going to use this tool and I'm going to pre-mark my stitch lines. You are going to probably want to use your chalk, or if you have one of those washable pencils. See if I can show you the angle. It leaves an indentation. It's kind of like, I don't know, like a pasta indenter maker. I don't make pasta. But it's very effective. So you've made your center line. Now we want another stitch line 1.5 inches on each side of that. So I'm going to measure from my first center stitch line. I'm going to measure, make sure it's lined up, and measure 1.5 inches over. I'm going to do that on both sides. I found this tool in my Mima's sewing box, and I'm so glad that she kept everything. She was a Depression era gal, so she didn't throw much away. And it has come in handy. All right, and then I'm going to do another one over here, 1.5 inches from there, 1.5 inches from here. Okay, so I've got 5 stitch lines, and I want to go ahead and start in the middle, and I'm going to stitch all the way down and then do the right stitch lines and then do the left stitch lines. I want to always start from the top, like say this is the top. I don't want to flip it over and do one line this way and one line this way and one line this way, because that might make the fabric pull in different directions. And I want everything, when the presser foot is walking down my fabric and sometimes it wants to shift, I want everything to slightly shift if it has to in the same direction. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the machine on and see if I can get you the other view. Okay, so I'm going to stick this under here, and be very careful when you're sewing. You might want to take out your needles that are close to it. I'm going to bring my presser foot down, and I'm going to make sure that my needle goes all the way through all 5 layers. And I started like 1/4 inch in from the edge of the fabric. This is a preference. This is what I always do. You may or may not do this. I like to start in reverse. I don't know why, but I'm going to start stitching, push my reverse button and start stitching backwards, and then start stitching forwards. Now, when you're putting something through your machine that has multiple layers, you want to make sure you're not pushing or tugging, but sometimes you might need to like stretch the front and the back of the fabric so that there's not like a big bumpy section. Like you don't want things to gather. So I'll just like, I guess it's more like having tension on the back and the front. As the feed dogs are feeding all of this through, I will gently hold the back and the front so that there are no wrinkles that show up in this piece. Get my pin out of there. And then I back stitch at the very end as well, just a little bit. I'll take that off, turn off the edge. So now we have our first stitch that's running all the way down. Now I want to do the other two sides from the top all the way down, and then the other two sides top all the way down. And then I'm going to trim off these little bits. Again, you don't have to start in the reverse. I do. I feel like it kind of keeps things from sliding down too much, but that is a personal preference. And I'm just using a very basic machine. And so this is something that you can get. You can pick up like a starter machine at Michael's, and they will do great things for a long, long time. I've had this one, I think about 10 years. My Mima gave me my first machine 20 years ago. And there's so much you can do with them. So mine probably needs to go in for a cleaning. Get all that fuzz out of there. Okay, so you can see I've got the first two, and I'm going to switch the camera real quick so that I can show you. I use some contrasting thread. You can use the same color thread if you want those lines to disappear a little bit more, but I really wanted some grid to show up. Okay, so I've got two lines, start at the top, come down, then I'll do one more, start at the top, go down here, and then I'll finish off this way. Now, the reason I start in the middle and not the outside is because this only allows for this much bunching up room, if there's going to be any, or this much bunching up room. If I'd started here, everything might have shifted a little bit by the time I got over to here. So I always like to work from the center out, and I want to work from the top down to the bottom instead of like turning it and going this way and then turning it and going that way. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside real quick and show you my finished 5 stitch lines. So now if you're happy with this and you just wanted diagonal lines, then you're good. But if you want a grid, we're going to flip it, and we're going to line everything up again and mark the center piece again. Okay, so I was working on a project recently. Let's do it 1.5 inches over again. And I was going back and forth between using this stitch marker and my rotary cutter. And it's similar. I mean, it's small, but it's similar to the rotary cutter, and like, grab this, okay, and it moves, great. And it was like a big patchwork block that I'd finished. And so I was wanting to mark off a quilting line, and I grabbed my rotary cutter. It was already open, and I went whoop, halfway through that block before I realized what I was doing, and I just cut right into it. So be attentive as you're sewing, watch out for fingers, and don't cut your work. It's kind of like, you feel like you're working at the pizza factory, cutting up the pizza. All right, y'all. So now I have, you can see when I tilt it a little bit, see my grid. And I'm going to go ahead and start in the middle again and stitch through. Now on this section, I'm going to show you my finished piece over here. As they go over the lines that have already been stitched, sometimes the presser foot will want to push the fabric down or forward. And if there's a stitch mark there, sometimes you can end up, if you have a lot of fabric here, you can end up with that fabric wanting to go over that stitch line. So that's what when I mentioned keeping attention right here, that will help if you are making it go through your feeder foot. If you're holding the back and the front, you're not pulling too hard, but you're just keeping some tension there, so that kind of like spreads the fabric out just enough so that it can go over that stitch line without pulling the fabric over it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stitch up some more. And at this point, the only thing that separates your little pot holder hot pad from a quilt, like it would be a whole cloth quilt, is that you have an extra layer of insulation in there.
Hey, Rachel, we have a question about the insulated material.
Yes.
So it looks like it has like a shiny side. Are they different, that a certain side needs to be on top?
Not that I'm aware of. I think from what I read on the instructions, when you're making a hot pad or an oven mitt, that having batting on both sides is helpful. So I don't think so, but again, I could be wrong. If they're needing to remove a layer of something, I would say check the manufacturer's instructions on the insulation that they purchase.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to finish this up with a little bit of tension. Okay, so instead of making y'all watch me sew every single line, I'm going to switch over to the next step. But you can see this is starting to form a really nice clean grid, and the fabric is not wanting to fold over those lines. The more layers you have, the more you have to consider that needle is having to go through, and it's wanting to pull the thread deeper. And so if you need to adjust the tension on your machine a little bit, go for a longer stitch. I would suggest that the more pieces of fiber that you're using. Okay, so we magically have a finished grid. I'm gonna have so many hot pads ready for my next meal, feast, whatever. Get these over here. So now we've got our grid done. You want to make sure on both sides that there's nothing wonky, but if there is, just don't show that side to anybody. Maybe that could be your practice one, and your next one you will have done a little bit better job, but they do happen. Now I need to trim this down so that I have clean edges, and when I stick my binding on, I can know that it's going to be able to stitch through the top fabric and the bottom fabric. Nothing's going to be short. So I want to line up my top using this like contrasting line right here in my camera. I want to line that up, and I'm going to find the shortest edge. So it's a little bit shorter here than it is down here. So I'm going to cut off the shortest edge, but make sure it is lined up. I've got my rotary cutter. I'm pushing down really hard on my ruler. Nice clean cut, and you can pull that off. And then I'm switching to the next one. Now I can see underneath here, my top layer is going over the top of the batting, but my bottom layer is like not quite as long. So I'm checking where my bottom layer is. like right here. So this is how much I need to cut off to make sure I'm going through all the layers. Turn that off. You can do this pretty quickly after you've gotten used to everything. So our finished piece is going to be a little bit less than 8 by 8. But when you do attach your binding, that might add a little bit to make up for what you're cutting off here. Look how pleasing to the eye that little grid is. All right, next step. If you have your binding ready, you're going to want to fold it in half lengthwise. I've already pre-ironed my little crease here so you can see. I'm going to fold it lengthwise so that those two raw edges meet up. And you might even want to iron it so that you can see the bottom raw edge poking out a little bit from the top raw edge, so you always know that you're stitching through both of them. And now once you've ironed that, you want to line it up with your top. I'm right-handed, so I'm starting with my top right corner and make sure it is flush or just just set in a little bit from the edge all the way down. And you're going to use your straight pins to make sure that you're going through just the 2 layers of the batting and maybe like the top layer of your fabric. The green fabric is what I've got here. Ugh. And if you're like a profesh, you don't have to always be adding straight pins. You can just kind of hold it where it needs to go. But it's kind of a risky move sometimes. So unless you're a super risky person, there you go. I suggest straight pinning your binding in place. But we're not going to straight pin all of it right now because I want to show you what we need to do here in the bottom corner. Okay, so I'm going to bring my sewing machine in. Now I am going to be stitching a 1/4 inch in from this outside part, okay? I have the foot on my machine is a 1/4 inch foot. I'm not sure exactly but it has a little edge to it, so it keeps me straight all the way down. You don't need that to do this. You can use the little guides that are sometimes right here on the metal plate. There's these little lines here. So you can use that as your guide as you're stitching through. Okay, so I'm gonna put this through here, starting pretty close to the top corner. And I know y'all can't really see that. Back stitch at the front. Once you get all the way to almost the very bottom of the corner, you're going to leave like a 1/4 inch from the edge, or a little bit less than a 1/4 inch in the back stitch here. So then I will show you where it is. Okay, I've stitched here all the way down. And I can see about a 1/4 inch from the edge here. So I didn't come all the way off the fabric. So we're going to be making like these cool mitered corners. The way that you do it, there's several ways to figure this out. My favorite way is to where the outside edge of your binding is right here. It's all the way flat. And then you're gonna wanna turn it this way to match up the outside edge here. And you're basically pinching a little triangle shape here. You want the outside edge of your binding to touch the outside edge of your quilted pad and then follow along this way. Okay, so you can see where I've stitched up to the bottom of where that pinched part would be. I don't want to stitch over that pinched part because then I'd be stitching through a lot of layers of fabric and then I wouldn't be able to move that fabric. So you need that part to be a little bit movable. Once you've got that pinched, fold it back towards the piece that's already been stitched down. And you can see where the bottom of that triangle meets. You do not want to stitch all the way up here because then again, you're stitching on that folded piece. That folded piece needs some freedom. So get it like just underneath that folded piece there and stitch all the way down. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Those mitered corners will get better the more you practice. And then I'm going to fold over my next one, make sure that I've got my little triangle here. You can kind of like fold it over and see where it's going to be flush with this part, then fold it the other way and see where it's going to be flush with that part. Find the bottom of my triangle. That's where I want to start stitching. There's so many ways to attach binding to things. This is what this is the way where you stitch it on with your machine first, and then you hand stitch the rest, which I think, I mean, I've done this for 15 years. I've been sewing quilts, and this is the most professionally finished way that I found to do it. It does take more time because hand stitching is a slower process, but I just feel like the pieces that you make with this technique, you're going to enjoy for a long, long time. But there are some other options if you're like, no, I've got like 10 minutes to finish this project. There's some other ways to attach binding if you just search YouTube a little bit. I am definitely like, if there's an easy way to do something, I kind of want to do that way. But the more years I put into my craft, the more I wish I had not always taken the easy route, because I can definitely see it in my pieces now when I took the easy way. Okay, so on this fourth edge, you're getting back to where you started. You don't want this to be laying flat when you stitch this down. You want this piece right here where you started to be folded over like this, because it's eventually going to need to be folded over this way. And we don't want it to get stitched down and then have to take the stitches out. So fold that first edge over, and then you can pin your binding to that fourth edge, and you're going to stitch all the way to the corner. You don't want to stitch onto this binding part where you started just yet. So leave that part alone, just stitch right until you get there. And again, I always suggest using straight pins until you get to where you're really comfortable without using them. For small projects, straight pins are a godsend. Okay, so we have finished the machine stitching portion of our project. And you want to trim off all of your little tails. I've been using these Fiskars snips because they're small, they're super sharp, and it just makes quick work of those little pieces. Okay, so now you've got these cute little triangles and a, an unfinished corner here. You also have a tail. You don't need all of this. I'm going to suggest like 6 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 inches. And then cut off that. Save this if you want to. You can probably reuse it in something. We might still trim this down a little bit more, but at least you have some wiggle room. Okay, so now you might want to go plug in your iron if it's not already plugged in. We are going to fold the edges back. You can see how pretty that looks right here. Just a nice, straight, clean edge. So that if this is the front side with that hand stitched clean edge, we're going to flip it over to the back side. And the reason that we trim down our sides before we put on our binding is because we want that clean edge to show up. When we fold our binding over and hand stitch this, then it's going to look really sharp. If that edge here is a little bit wonky or a little bit crooked, when you fold your binding over, that's going to also show up. So clean edges, sharp cuts. Next, let's see, if you want to, you can iron this down. You can iron this over so that this part is really flat. And then we are going to start in this corner where we started hand stitching. When you fold all of this over, again, if you want to go ahead and prepare it by ironing it, you can. You can also use your straight pins to kind of catch that top layer and just make sure everything is going to fold over and stay put. Or if you have some sort of like a clothespin or bobby pin or some hair clips, sometimes you can put those on here and that's even faster, and then you won't stab yourself like I do sometimes. When I'm quilting, I do this much more, but this is a smaller space or smaller project. But I just kind of will pull over one side at a time, and we're going to hand stitch from here all the way to the corner. I'm going to show you how to do that corner. Okay, so for your hand stitched, where did I put my needle? We're going to need a sharp needle and some thread from your machine. You can use the same thread that you have been using on your sewing machine. So thread your needle and then tie a knot where the two ends meet. Double knot so that you have something like this. I only work with maybe like 16 inches of, well, however this long is, this much at a time. So it'd be like cut 32 inches and then thread your needle, fold it in half, tie a knot at the ends. Anything much longer for this type of project and you're just going to be swimming in it. So this isn't going to get you all the way around your pot holder, but it's going to get you maybe 2 sides. Okay, so for this part, I know it's a little bit harder to see small needlework from this angle, but I'm going to do my best. I'm going to stitch through the top fabric in the corner and maybe the first piece of batting. I want to kind of anchor this into somewhere where it's not going to rip out easily. So I stitch through, and then I'm going to go in between where my knot is and pull it tight. Okay, so that's kind of anchored my tail end. And I'm folding this back over. Now my knot is going to be hidden underneath my binding. I'm going to come up from underneath the binding and just grab a tiny, like 3 or 4, I don't know. I don't know how to even measure that, like a needle's worth in from the edge. And it's the folded edge. I'm going to stick your needle through there. You don't want it so close to the edge that it's going to like rip through, but we're trying to like hide these stitches. So I've come up through the top and this is folded over. And now I'm going to go over that edge and I'm going to pick up the green fabric, that's fabric A, and I'm going to go like so that this will make a straight line over. I don't want an angled line. I just want a straight line. And I'm going to stitch right underneath, but in the green fabric. And then I'm going to stitch under the green fabric about 1/4 of an inch. You can see where it's sticking through here. And I'm going to pull that through. So now I'm 1/4 inch this way, and I'm going to stitch right where I came up. I'm going to stitch underneath the pink binding so that I just grab that pink binding just a little bit and come up, and I'm going to come down into the green again in the same kind of spot, but really close to where I started. And I'm going to stitch under the green layer so that I come up 1/4 inch this way. Now you can do this and pick up the pink at the same time, where I get through the green and the pink at the same time. That's what you're eventually going to want to start doing. But if you want to do the green first and then pick up under the pink, that's fine too. Okay, so this is going to almost hide your stitch. There might just be a little bit that you can see. And if you want to use a thimble, I mean, sometimes they're helpful. There's a few other products out there that work like a thimble to keep you from getting sore fingers from the hand stitching part. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. And you're going to stitch about 1/4 inch apart. And you want to pull so that this is taut, but it's not like super tight, because then you might break your thread. But 1/4 inch apart is going to keep that binding all the way down without big gaps. And it just looks pretty sharp. Okay, so you're going to keep doing this hand stitching all the way down to, let's get down to your first corner, and then I will show you the very end part. So I'm going to make quick stitches here. I've been doing a lot of quilting this year, and I was binding some quilts last week and was also watching a show. And so I wasn't always paying attention and have stabbed myself accidentally a few times and like drawn blood. So you do want to kind of mind your fingers as you're working on this part. I mean, I guess that is par for the course. When you have really sharp needles, you want to make sure that those needles are going to go through all your layers of fabric pretty easily, not your skin. Okay, I'm almost in the corner here. I want to like press down really hard so that I can get a little bit of a shape there. And I'm going to come up right here where like this last seam. So I want to come up, make sure that I don't have any other threads that are loose. So now that's as far as I need to stitch. I'm going to fold over this side, but I want to make sure that my corners look really sharp. I want to fold it over and get this folded edge to match up right here. If this part is not perfect, it's not a deal breaker, but it's going to look really nice. So once that's folded over, you come underneath that corner and you catch that top pink corner. And then you stitch right underneath all of that. And then you start your new direction of stitching a 1/4 inch-ish this way. And then when you pull it, it's going to give you that nice mitered edge look. Okay, so pretend that I am really fast at this. Okay, so we've got this started and we've gone all the way to the corner. So finish out and you're going to this corner and then all the way to this corner. Presto changeo. Look how fast I am. Okay, so I've got all of this stitched down. Now we're going to finish this bad boy up. This section right here is probably still going to feel like I think yours is still going to be flat, but we folded it over. And so the part that got folded over here on this needs to be pressed under like that. So with your iron, this is folded over almost in a third, or to a third. Press this with your iron and then fold it over kind of like so. You're going to use a straight pen to mark this point so it doesn't come off. And then if you want to use a straight pen here to make sure that this doesn't all come apart, it's basically folded into thirds. You can do it this way. I just want that to stay put. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch, I've stitched, hand stitched to here. I want to stitch over where I started and go through the green, which is my top layer, but also the pink. So you can see I've gone through just the corner of this bottom part of my binding. And now I also want to come up and grab the edge of that top part of my binding. Get this out of the way here. So I've grabbed all the different layers here. And then I just want to do one more stitch through this top piece and grab right here in the pink. Now we're going to have to move on to kind of like a hidden stitch where the top and the bottom folds of this pink binding are. And again, it's a little bit hard to see from this camera angle. So I'm on the top, I want to grab underneath the fold of the binding and I'm going to stitch up maybe like 1/8 of an inch in that bottom fold. I'm going to get a couple of these and then I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit. And then I am going to come up and grab where it's like right here on the edge. I'm going to just grab another 1/8 of an inch. This is going to hide your seam. And I'm going to come in here and grab 1/8 of an inch. And come back on the top and grab 1/8 of an inch. You can also do this with your sewing machine if you just want to stitch along that edge, but it doesn't look quite as clean. So this is what I suggest.
Hey, Rachel, when you're doing all of the hand stitching, like around the whole thing, do you have the needle go through all of the layers or just the like top of like your fabric A and then the binding?
That's a good question. Just the top of the fabric and the binding. Yeah, you don't have to go through the whole thing. In fact, if you did go through the whole thing, it might even show up on the back side. So we want to kind of keep those stitches hidden. So yeah, just through that top layer and then pick up through the binding.
Thank you.
All right, let me see if I could get this part through here and then we are going to tuck it under right through here. And so I said you might have like an extra long tail. I'm going to go ahead and trim another inch off of this. So now this is measuring about 3 inches, a little bit less. When you finish this part up, it's going to get tucked underneath your binding, so you don't have to worry about hiding your knot. So you can go ahead and like stitch this last part, just stitch it together and tie, like do a loop and then go under the loop with your needle. Or make a mess. Either one, it's not going to show. Goodness. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and trim this. Okay, so this is a stitch right here, and that's holding these two pieces together. You're going to want to iron that flat at the end, but right now, you want to fold this back over like so, with about 1/2 inch to spare. And then tuck this in between where you've stitched down. And if you have to unstitch something right here, like I probably could have left a little bit more space. You want to hide that end underneath your hand sewn edge. Oh my goodness, get in there. Tuck that in. I've got this written down in my blog notes. Leave yourself some more room. And then I went ahead and forgot to do it. So, but this does go in here eventually. And you will also stitch this down. I'm going to go ahead and show you the finished version over here. So you can see here where this went underneath that first part where we started. And then you'll just do another kind of stitch to get this tucked in so it's not going to pull out whenever you're hanging something. If you want to hang these to make them decorative, this provides you a little bit of a loop. So again, you can stitch underneath the binding, but also you want to stitch through the end of this loop and the top layer of your fabric A, and you can hide your knots underneath. Let's see, so I'm going to show you a technique for hiding your knots real quick, and then we're going to be finished.
We have a question about how do you feel about using fusible web tape to hold the binding in place while you finish the edges?
I have never used it, but I know that some people are really comfortable with that. So if you do want to try that, I think that's a good option. I just don't have any personal experience with using it to say if it's better. Sometimes, like, definitely taking the extra time can make your finished piece look really good. And if it's helpful for you to use that, then I'd say go for it. Okay, so here's my little knot. Whenever you have something that is a knot you want to hide, let's see if I can get this through here. You know, tuck that tail and trim it down, and then tuck that tail end under a little bit. Then when you're finished, you've tied your knot off. Well, what do you do with this? Do you just trim it, or do you, like, what? You want to make sure that you're stitching underneath something and all the way through. Pull it out the other way and pull that knot so that it's like hiding underneath your binding. And then trim it where it comes out the other end. And then pull a little bit so that it's sucked underneath the fabric, and then it's not going to show. Okay, any questions? We finished, we did it. We've got all these hot pads. Now what? You can wash these. You're going to need to probably. You can wash these. You can choose some colors and, you know, 3 different colors and switch them out and make a little trio. It's really cute and fun. 8 by 8 is a really good size for most plates that are going to be hot or dishes. And it's also big enough where you can like fold it in half and grab something, and it's not going to get all in your casserole dish. So that's that. I'm going to switch over to the other camera and see if we have any last minute questions on your project. Thank you for joining us today.
There's a question about what stitch length did you use for the top stitching?
About 1/4 inch. Now wait, is that for the hand stitching portion or for the machine stitch portion?
For the machine portion.
Okay, so on mine, it is like the longest thread stitch that's allowed because there are so many layers and it has to go through so many, like through a bigger thickness. So I only have on my machine, I only have 3 stitch lengths and mine is the longest stitch length. But if you feel like you don't like the way that looks, you can adjust yours accordingly. Well, I want to say thank you to everyone who came today, and I hope all of you have a wonderful holiday season, whether you're cooking or being fed. Oh, I see another question about the binding cut on the bias. Not for this project, because there are no curves in our project. I just cut straight across. If I was making a round pot holder, yes, you would need to cut your binding on the bias because that gives it a little bit of that stretch that you need without getting a bunch of wrinkles. Thank you guys all for coming today. I see some of those chat messages. I really appreciate you having good questions and good feedback.
Thanks so much, Rachel.
Thank you. We're going to wrap it up. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.